That white envelope is still sitting in my desk drawer to this day. I've never thrown it away, even though every time I see it, it still feels like someone is squeezing my chest. Inside, there was only a single sheet of paper, a table of numbers, and one line written in the cold, emotionless language of medicine. Probability of paternity, 0%. Those 3 words, 0%, turned the last 8 years of my life into something that felt like a lie from beginning to end. But let me start from the beginning, because if you only hear my story from this point, you'll probably think I was just a naive victim. The truth is, I used to be the person who was absolutely certain that my marriage was perfectly fine. My name is, let's call me Adit, because I don't want my real name exposed on the internet. My wife, let's call her Rana, and I got married 8 years ago. We met at work. She was in the marketing department, and I worked in IT. At first, it was nothing special. Casual conversations in the office pantry turned into lunches together, and somehow, before we knew it, we were engaged within a year. Rana was the kind of woman who was warm and caring, but also somewhat private about her past. She once told me she'd been in a complicated relationship before we met, with someone named Bimo at college, friend she described as toxic, and someone who had left her with emotional scars. I never pushed her to tell me more. I believed not everyone needed to open every chapter of their past. I respected her privacy. We had a simple wedding ceremony. 8 months later, Rana became pregnant. We both cried the moment we saw the pregnancy test showing 2 lines. I still remember that night vividly. I held her in front of the bathroom mirror as we laughed and cried at the same time, imagining the future that was waiting for us. 9 months later, our daughter, Kirana, was born. We gave her that name because Rana wanted it. To be honest, the name was entirely her idea, and I happily agreed. To me, a name was never the important part. What mattered was this: she was my daughter. Or, at least, that's what I believed. Looking back now, I realized there were several small things I dismissed as unimportant. The first was something my mother-in-law Anna's mom said when Kirana was about 2 years old. It's funny. She doesn't really have Adit's eyes. She looks more like, well, I don't know. Maybe she takes after one of her grandparents. I just laughed it off. Kids' faces change as they grow up, so I didn't think anything of it. The second happened when Kirana was 4. We were having a family picnic at Rana's parents' house. There was an old photo hanging on the wall from Rana's college days, showing her standing with a group of friends. Out of curiosity, I pointed at the picture and asked, "Which one is Bimo?" Rana suddenly went quiet. Then she quickly changed the subject and said, "Why are you asking about him? Just forget about the past." At the time, I thought her reaction was completely normal. After all, who enjoys talking about an ex in front of their spouse? The third thing, and the one I regret not looking into more deeply, was Kirana's severe peanut allergy. As far as I knew, neither my family nor Rana's family had any history of peanut allergies. Our pediatrician even commented, "That's a bit unusual. Allergies like this are often inherited from one of the parents." Neither Rana nor I was allergic to peanuts, so we simply shrugged and assumed it must have come from a distant grandparent or some forgotten branch of the family tree. One by one, I buried those little inconsistencies beneath the routine of everyday life. I was busy with work. Rana was busy raising Kirana. Life felt perfectly normal, waking up early, taking our daughter to school, going to work, coming home, eating dinner together, and going to bed. Until one morning in March, everything changed because of one seemingly harmless sentence. "Honey, what do you think about getting a DNA test for Kirana? Just for fun." It's all over TikTok right now. They say it can tell you your ancestry, inherited health risks, and all kinds of interesting stuff. I remember I was making coffee at the time, only half paying attention because I was reading a work email that still needed a reply. "Oh, sure. That actually sounds kind of fun," I answered, without the slightest hint of suspicion. Looking back now, Rana's voice was far too calm, far too casual for something that I've since come to realize she may have already suspected the outcome of. But that's how people are. We only recognize the warning signs after we already know how the story ends. Back then, I genuinely saw it as nothing more than a fun family activity of social media. trend where people took consumer DNA tests to learn about their ancestry. Not a serious forensic paternity test. We ordered a DNA testing kit from an online service. The process was simple. We swabbed the inside of the cheek with a special cotton swab, sealed the sample in a tube, and mailed it to the laboratory. I was the one who collected Kirana's sample. While swabbing her cheek, I joked, "Let's see where you're really from. Maybe you'll turn out to be from another planet." Kirana, who was 6 years old at the time, just giggled because the cotton swab tickled her cheek. I also submitted my own sample, since the package we ordered included a family match option, which compared the genetic relationship between parent and child in addition to providing ancestry analysis. After we mailed the samples, life went on as usual. I almost forgot about the test entirely. Then 2 weeks later, an email landed in my inbox. "Your DNA analysis results are ready?" That night, I didn't get home from work until 9 o'clock. Rana had already put Kirana to bed. The house was silent, filled only with the hum of the air conditioner and the refrigerator. I sat down in the living room, opened my laptop, and logged into the testing company's online portal. The report was divided into 2 sections. The first covered ethnicity and geographic ancestry. The second was labeled Relationship Verification, a section I had almost forgotten we'd selected when we signed up. I opened the ancestry report first. It was actually pretty interesting. There were colorful charts showing percentages of different ethnic backgrounds and regions, the kind of infographic people love sharing on Instagram stories. I even took a screenshot, planning to send it to my family group chat. Then I clicked on the second section. The page loaded for a few seconds. Then a table appeared with 2 columns, Participant Ami and Participant B Kirana. Beneath them was a single line of text, Probability of paternity, 0%. Based on the genetic markers analyzed, the tested male is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. I remember reading that sentence over and over again. Not because I didn't understand the English. I understood every single word. My mind simply refused to accept what those words meant. I sat on that couch for I don't even know how long. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe half an hour. Time seemed to stop. The first thing I felt wasn't anger. Strangely enough, my first thought was, this has to be a mistake. The lab must have mixed up the samples. I immediately searched through my email for the customer service number. I sent a long message explaining the situation, asking them to verify the results or repeat the test. An automated reply arrived almost instantly. Investigating a possible sample mix-up would take 3 to 5 business days. Those 3 to 5 days felt like a prison sentence. I had to sleep in the same bed as Rana, eat dinner with her, drive Kirana to school, all while carrying a secret that made my chest tighten every time I looked at their faces. I decided not to say a single word to Rana, not until I was absolutely certain this wasn't just a technical error. While we were waiting for the results, I did something you'll probably think was a little crazy. I started digging through old boxes, looking for photographs and old messages, trying to piece together important dates. I remembered that we got married in June. Kirana was born the following April, about 10 months after our wedding, which meant, based on a rough timeline, she would have been conceived around July, about a month after we were married. But then I remembered something I'd never thought twice about before. That July, I had been sent out of town on a work assignment for 3 full weeks. Rana was the one who drove me to the airport. She hugged me tightly before I left and told me she was going to miss me. Back then, those 3 weeks felt like just another small detail in our married life. Now, those same 3 weeks felt like a black hole that had swallowed every ounce of certainty I had ever known. I scrolled through our old WhatsApp conversations from that period. Most of the messages were completely ordinary. Rana talked about work, complained about feeling exhausted handling everything on her own, and sent me pictures of her dinners. But there was one name that kept appearing in her stories. She described him as an old friend I happened to run into again. His name was Bimo. I didn't jump to accusations. I'm not the kind of person who makes assumptions without evidence. So I waited. 5 days later, an email from the laboratory arrived. The message was brief. After conducting a second investigation, including verifying the chain of custody for the samples and repeating the analysis using the backup sample they had stored, the results remained consistent. There had been no procedural errors. The outcome was exactly the same. I remember sitting in my office parking lot for nearly 2 hours after reading that email. I couldn't bring myself to drive home. That night I got home later than usual. I waited until Kirana was completely asleep, her bedroom lights already off, before I sat down in the living room and called Rana over. "Rana, we need to talk." The tone of my voice must have been different from usual because I saw the expression on her face change instantly. "What do you want to talk about?" Without saying another word, I placed my laptop on the coffee table, opened the test results, and slowly turned the screen toward her. I remember those moments with absolute clarity. I watched as the color slowly drained from her face. She stared at the screen for what felt like forever without saying a word, as if she believed that if she stayed silent long enough, the words on the screen would somehow change on their own. This has to be wrong, doesn't it? Labs make mistakes. I already asked them to run the test again, I said. 5 days later, the results came back exactly the same. A long, crushing silence filled the room. The air conditioner in the living room suddenly felt colder than ever, or maybe it was just me. "Rana," I said, my voice trembling, "I'm only going to ask you one question. And please, don't lie to me anymore." I took a shaky breath. "Who is Kirana's father?" She broke down in tears. Not fake tears. I'd lived with her for 8 years. I knew the difference between genuine crying and tears meant to manipulate someone. These were real. The kind of tears that come from someone who has finally run out of places to hide from the truth. "Bimo," she whispered at last, so quietly I could barely hear it. It turned out that the complicated and toxic relationship with Bimo she had told me about hadn't ended exactly the way she'd claimed. Yes, they had broken up before Rana and I started dating. But during the 3 weeks I was away on a business trip, Bimo, who had apparently kept Rana's phone number all those years, reached out and asked if she wanted to meet, just to catch up as old friends. That meeting as friends became something else. Rana told me it happened only once, during a moment when she felt lonely and emotionally vulnerable because I was away. She said she regretted it the very same night. But she never confessed, not even a few weeks later, when the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. I was sure the baby was yours back then. We were still together after you came home from your business trip. I thought the chances were so small that the baby could belong to anyone else," she said, trying to explain a line of reasoning that, to me, made absolutely no sense when it came to something this important. I asked the question that hurt more than anything else. "If you were really that sure, then why were you the one who suggested the DNA test? Why now, after 6 years?" She sat there in silence for what felt like forever. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "Because Bimo, he contacted me again last month. He told me he'd seen pictures of Kirana on your Instagram, and he said, she looks exactly like his younger sibling did when they were little. He started to suspect the truth. He threatened to get a DNA test himself if I didn't tell you everything. So it was never just for fun. It was never about a TikTok trend. It was never about satisfying our curiosity over our family's ancestry. The DNA test was her way of controlling the truth before it came from someone else, before Bimo exposed everything and made her look like the worst kind of liar in my eyes. She believed that if we discovered the results together, if she acted just as shocked as I was, it would somehow make the situation seem more forgivable. I sat there in silence, trying to process it all. Not just the fact that someone else was Kirana's biological father, but the 6 years of lies that had been lived so effortlessly. The smiles, the goodnight hugs, the ordinary moments I had believed were completely real. "I still love you as Kirana's father," she said, reaching for my hand. "Maybe you're not her biological father, I pulled my hand away. Rana, this isn't just about DNA. It's about the fact that you lied to me for 6 years. It's about the fact that you're only telling me the truth because you had no other choice, not because you wanted to. That night I didn't sleep in our bedroom. I moved into the guest room, and that's where I stayed for the next several months. I'm not going to go into every detail of the legal process because it was long, exhausting, and emotionally draining. To make a long story short, we decided to get divorced. The divorce took almost a full year to finalize. The hardest part wasn't dividing our assets or dealing with the paperwork. The hardest part was Kirana. I met with a lawyer to discuss custody, and that's when I was faced with one of the harshest realities of my life. Legally, even though I wasn't her biological father, I was still listed as her legal father on her birth certificate, and I had raised her since the day she was born. My lawyer explained that if I chose to remain a father figure in her life, the law could still recognize and support that arrangement as long as both sides agreed. And that's when I was confronted with the most difficult question I have ever faced. Is a father's love defined by blood or by 6 years of memories? The sleepless nights holding her while she burned with a fever, teaching her how to ride a bicycle, sitting beside her as she learned to read, laughing together after she fell off a swing only to burst into laughter herself. A second later, I decided to remain a part of Kirana's life, not because I had forgiven Rana, but because Kirana never asked to be born into this web of lies. She was just a little girl who had sincerely called me Dad her entire life, and I couldn't bear the thought of the look on her face if I suddenly disappeared from her life without explanation. We reached an agreement that I would continue having regular visitation with her, even though my legal status as her biological father would gradually be changed through a long, complicated, and emotionally painful legal process. My extended family was devastated when they found out. My mother cried as I told her everything. But there is one thing my father said that I will never forget. Son, being a father isn't defined by blood alone, but you have every right to be angry, every right to grieve, and every right to decide how far you're willing to go from here. As for Bimo, I have never met him face to face, not even to this day. From what I've heard, he has also been considering whether to become involved in Kirana's life. But that process isn't simple either, especially since he already has a family of his own. Now, nearly 2 years after that night, I still keep that white envelope in my desk drawer. Not as a reminder of the pain, but as a reminder of the turning point in my life, the moment I learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. Rana and I are officially divorced now. We're not close friends, but we've learned to be mature and co-parent for Kirana's sake. Every weekend I still pick her up, take her out for ice cream, and help her with her homework. Some of you are probably wondering why I still choose to be part of the life of a child who isn't biologically mine. Honestly, I still ask myself that same question on the hardest nights. But every time Kirana comes running toward me, throws her arms around me and shouts, "Dad!" I'm reminded that the love we built over those 6 years was real, even if the blood relationship wasn't. If there's one lesson I've taken away from all of this, it's this. A truth told too late is still better than a lie that lasts forever. But even better is telling the truth because it's the right thing to do, not because you've been backed into a corner with no other choice. And if you're carrying a life-changing secret from someone you love, think carefully. Because the truth has a way of finding its own path to the surface, sooner or later. And the longer you hide it, the greater the damage it leaves behind when it finally comes out. If you've ever been through something similar, or if you have an opinion about what you think I should have done, let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more unforgettable stories I'll be sharing with you next week.